The second regular session of the 18th Congress is hereby called to order. The birthday celebrant, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III, will lead the chamber in prayer.
Our Heavenly Father, we acknowledge your lordship and sovereignty over us and over our nation. Thank you, Lord, for the gift of life. Thank you for all the countless blessings
The
you have
second
given
regular
us in
session of
every
the 18th
stage of our
Congress
lives.
is hereby called to order.
It is your design that has brought us
The birthday
to our
celebrant,
present position
Senator
of
Aquilino
leadership in
Coco
the Senate,
Pimentel III,
which
will lead
carries
the
great
chamber in prayer.
responsibility and accountability to
Our
God
Heavenly
and
Father,
to the
we
Filipino
acknowledge your lordship and sovereignty over
as we
us
celebrate the gift
and
of
over
life
our
for all
nation.
of our January
Thank you, Lord, for the
birthday
gift of life.
celebrants.
Thank
Allow
you
me
for
to
all
recall
the
the
countless
lives
blessings
and
you
the
have given
regular
us in
session of
every
the
Senate
18th
Congress
Congress who have
is
gone
hereby
ahead of
called
us.
to order.
It is your design
I lift up to you, Lord, the
that has
souls
brought
of
us
the birthday
to our
celebrant,
present position
Senator
of
Aquilino
leadership in
Coco
the Senate,
Pimentel III,
which
will lead
carries
the
great
chamber in prayer.
responsibility and accountability
Our Heavenly Father,
and to the
we acknowledge your
Philippines.
lordship and sovereignty over
As we
us
celebrate the gift
and
of
over
life
our
for all
nation.
of our January
Thank you, Lord, for the
birthday
gift of life.
celebrants, which
Thank
allow
you
me
for
to
all the
recall
countless
lives
blessings you have
suffering
given us in
session of
every
the 18th
18th Congress
Congress who have
is
gone
hereby
ahead of
called to
us.
order.
It is your design
I lift up to you, Lord, the
that has
souls of
brought us
the birthday
to our
celebrant,
present position
Senator
of
Aquilino
leadership
Coco
in the Senate,
Pimentel III,
which carries great responsibility and accountability.
Our Heavenly Father, we acknowledge your lordship and sovereignty over
As we
us
celebrate the gift
and
of
over our
life for all
nation.
of our January
Thank you, Lord, for the
birthday
gift of life.
celebrants, in all our
Thank you for all the countless blessings you have given us in every state of our lives. It is your design that has brought us the birthday celebrant, present position of leadership in the Senate, which carries great responsibility and accountability. Our Heavenly Father, we acknowledge your lordship and sovereignty over
As we
us
celebrate the gift
and
of
over our
life for all
nation.
of our January
Thank you, Lord, for the gift of life.
in all our
Thank you for all the countless blessings you have given us in every state of our lives. It is your design that has brought us the birthday celebrant, present position of leadership in the Senate, which carries great responsibility and accountability. Our Heavenly Father, we acknowledge your lordship and sovereignty over us. We celebrate the gift and over our January. Thank you, Lord, for the gift of life.
in all our
Thank you for all the countless blessings you have given us in every state of our lives. It is your design that has brought us the birthday celebrant, present position of leadership in the Senate, which carries great responsibility and accountability. Our Heavenly Father, we acknowledge your lordship and sovereignty over us. Celebrate the gift and over our January. Thank you, Lord, for the gift of life.
in all our
Thank you for all the countless blessings you have given us in every state of our lives. It is your design that has brought us the birthday celebrant, present position of leadership in the Senate, which carries great responsibility and accountability. Our Heavenly Father, we acknowledge your lordship and sovereignty over us. Celebrate the gift and over our January. Thank you, Lord, for the gift of life.
in all our
Thank you for all the countless blessings you have given us in every state of our lives. It is your design that has brought us the birthday celebrant,
Today,
Celebrate the gift of life.
I move, Mr. President, that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 36th session Tuesday, July 2020. I move that we proceed with the reference. I move, Mr. President, that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 36th session Tuesday, I move that we proceed with the reference.
Lahat ng ginawa ko, mabait lahat yan.
Yeah, once again, Mr. President, all of us in the online have also want to greet Senator Coco. Happy birthday. You all want to greet him
Yes,
happy birthday as well.
he
According
is
to Senator
exploratory.
According to Senator Ralph, Mr. President, lahat ng mga born in January mababait katulad niya.
Katulad niya.
Yeah, opo, Mr. President.
All right. Well, just for the record, Senator Coco Pimentel.
Yeah,
has,
once again, Mr. President, all of
beautiful
us in
wife
the
of my
online have
nana
also want to
has,
greet Senator Coco.
prepared
Happy
a
birthday.
very sumptuous
You all want to greet him
yes,
happy birthday as well.
merienda today.
According to
And, for
Senator
the information of
According to
everyone, tomorrow
Senator
is the
Ralph, Mr.
birthday of
President,
Senator
lahat ng
Ronald
mga
Pato de
born
la
in
Rosa.
January mababait katulad niya.
And he promises
Yeah.
to bring
Yeah,
a feast on
Mr.
Monday.
President.
So I suggest that those of you who can be just for the record, should be here on Monday. Senator Coco Pimentel.
Habol ako
has
Tuesday, once again, Mr. President, all of us in the online have also want to greet Senator Coco.
prepared
Happy
a
birthday.
very sumptuous.
You all want to greet him happy birthday as well.
Mr. President, parliamentary.
According to Senator According to
Can
Senator
the
Ralph, Mr.
merienda
President.
be brought home to us? Home delivery.
We will look at the possibility of either Grab or.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Thank you. Yeah, yes, Senator Cayetano.
Cayetano.
Go ahead.
I have a
Cayetano.
question. I didn't realize it was Senator Bato's birthday, also January celebrant. So now I'm thinking, is that the reason, may I ask him, is that the reason why tinukoy niya na si Senator Ralph, Senator Coco, the birthday celebrant, and him, binansagan niyang yung magagandang lalaki. Nabasa ko yun dun sa isang text eh. So yun ba yung reason? Kasi January sila. Para lang clear, kasi paglalaban ko naman na yung ibang hindi January celebrant dito, magagandang lalaki din. So I want to know if that's the reason. Para kung yun ang reason, di pagbigyan na natin yung mga January celebrant.
Oo nga, Senator Tolentino also, January.
Oh, pero hindi yata niya binanggit si Senator Tolentino, kaya di ko alam kung may pinag siya eh.
All right, all right. Thank you. So let's proceed. The reference of business.
Reference of business, message from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 18 January 2021, it passed the following House bills in which it requests the concurrence of the Senate. House number 8164, an act providing for the revised charter of the Philippine Veterans Bank, repealing for the purpose Republic Act number 3518 as amended.
To the committees on banks, national defense and security. Yes, that's it.
House number 8057, an act instituting the Magna Carta of Filipino Seafarers.
Referred to Committee on Labor and Foreign Relations.
House number 8140, an act providing enhanced protection, security, and benefits for media workers.
Referred to Committees on Labor and Public Information, Mass Media.
House number 2378, an act declaring the city of San Jose del Monte in the province of Bulacan as human resource capital.
To the Committee on Labor.
House number 7460, an act to declare the city of Davao as the chocolate and cacao production capital of the Philippines and for other purposes.
To the Committee on Agriculture.
House number 7700, an act reapportioning the first legislative district of the city of Caloocan into 2 legislative districts.
To the Committees on Local Government and Electoral Reforms.
House number 7950, an act creating a system of partnership between local governments and civil society organizations through the establishment of a People's Council in every local government unit, prescribing its powers and functions and providing for its participation in the local sanggunian and local boards, councils, committees, task forces, or similar work groups.
To the Committees on Local Government, Electoral Reforms, and Finance.
And House number 8136, an act including a national artist as a member of the National Commission for Culture and Arts, amending for the purpose Republic Act number 7356, otherwise known as the law creating the National Commission for Culture and Arts.
To the Committee on Basic Education.
Bills on first reading, Senate number 1994, an act providing for a vaccine or immunization passport for COVID-19 and other emerging or re-emerging infectious diseases, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Poe.
To the Committees on Health and Finance.
Senate number 1995, an act amending Section 78, 79, 81, 84, 85, and 86 of Presidential Decree number 705 as amended, otherwise known as the Revised Forestry Code of the Philippines, thereby imposing stiffer penalties on crimes committed in relation to forest lands, grazing lands, and the national park system, introduced by Senator Lapid.
The Committee on Environment.
Senate Number 1996, an act granting the President of the Philippines the power to suspend the scheduled increases in Social Security System SSS contribution rates, amending for the purpose Republic Act Number 11199, otherwise known as the Social Security Act of 2018, introduced by Senator Revilla Jr.
To the Committees on Government Corporations and Labor.
Senate Number 1997, an act establishing the Forensic Science Institute in the University of the Philippines System, defining its functions and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Revilla Jr.
To the Committees on Higher Education, Public Order, and Finance.
Senate Number 1998, an act providing for a comprehensive atomic regulatory framework, creating for the purpose the Philippine Atomic Regulatory Commission and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Revilla Jr.
To the Committees on Science and Technology, Civil Service, Ways and Means, and Finance.
Communications, letter from Secretary Salvador C. Medialdea, dated 28 December 2020, transmitting to Congress through the Senate, Republic Act Number 11518, or the Fiscal Year 2021 General Appropriations Act, duly signed by the President and the President's Budget Action Message.
To the Archives.
Letter from the Office of the President of the Philippines, transmitting to the Senate two original copies of the following acts, which lapse into law pursuant to Article 6, Section 27, Paragraph 1 of the Constitution. Republic Act Number 11503, an act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to International Communications Corporation, presently known as Bayan Telecommunications Inc., under Republic Act Number 3259, entitled an act granting the International Communications Corporation a franchise to establish radio stations for domestic telecommunications, radiophone, broadcasting, and telecasting as amended by Republic Act Numbers 4905 and 7633. Republic Act Number 11504, an act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to Caceres Broadcasting Corporation under Republic Act Number 8106, entitled an act granting the Caceres Broadcasting Corporation a franchise to construct, install, operate, and maintain radio and television broadcasting stations in the island of Luzon and for other purposes. Republic Act Number 11505, an act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to Metro Manila Turf Club Inc. under Republic Act Number 7978, entitled an act granting the Metro Manila Turf Club Inc. a franchise to construct, operate, and maintain a racetrack for horse racing in the city of Caloocan as amended by Republic Act Number 8298. Republic Act Number 11506, an act granting San Miguel Aero City Inc. a franchise to construct, develop, establish, operate, and maintain a domestic and international airport in the municipality of Bulacan, province of Bulacan, and to construct, develop, establish, operate, and maintain an adjacent airport city. Republic Act Number 11507, an act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to FBS Radio Network Inc. under Republic Act Number 811 entitled an act granting FBS Radio Network Inc. a franchise to establish, construct, install, maintain, and operate commercial radio and television stations in the Philippines and for other purposes. Republic Act Number 11508, an act amending the franchise granted to Philippine Collective Media Corporation under Republic Act Number 9773, entitled an act granting the Philippine Collective Media Corporation a franchise to construct, install, establish, operate, and maintain radio and television broadcasting stations in Region 8, Eastern Visayas. Republic Act Number 11512, an act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to Cruz Telephone Company Inc. under Republic Act Number 7691, entitled an act granting to Cruz Telephone Company Inc. Cruz Telco a telecommunication system throughout the Philippines. Republic Act Number 11513, an act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to Century Communications Marketing Center Inc., doing business under the name and style of Century Broadcasting Network under Republic Act Number 8133, entitled an act granting Century Communications Marketing Inc. a franchise to construct, install, operate, and maintain for commercial purposes radio and television broadcasting stations in the Philippines and for other purposes. Republic Act...
What is that? Republic what? To the Archives. All of them to the Archives.
Don't want me to read it anymore.
Good.
Republic Act Number 11514, an act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to Tandag Electric and Telephone Company Inc. under Republic Act Number 8715, entitled an act granting the Tandag Electric and Telephone Company Inc. a franchise to construct, establish, install, maintain, and operate local exchange network in the province of Surigao del Sur. Republic Act Number 11515, an act extending for another 25 years the franchise granted to Davao Light and Power Company Inc. under Republic Act Number 8960, entitled an act further extending the term of franchise granted to Davao Light and Power Company Inc. to construct, operate, and maintain an electric light, heat, and power system in Davao City and the municipalities of Carmen, Panabo, Duhali, and Santo Tomas, province of Davao del Norte for a period of 25 years and for other purposes. And Republic Act Number 11516, An act renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to Negros Broadcasting and Publishing Corporation under Republic Act Number 8161 entitled An Act granting the Negros Broadcasting and Publishing Corporation a franchise to establish, operate, and maintain radio and television broadcasting stations in Visayas and Mindanao.
To the archives.
Letters from the Office of the President to the Philippines transmitting to the Senate two original copies of the following Republic Acts which were signed by President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Republic Act Number 11509 entitled An Act establishing a medical scholarship and return service program for deserving students and appropriating funds therefore. Republic Act Number 11510, an act institutionalizing the alternative learning system in basic education for out-of-school children in special cases and adults and appropriating funds therefore. Republic Act Number 11511, an act amending Republic Act Number 10068 or the Organic Agriculture Act of 2010. Republic Act Number 11517, an act authorizing the President to expedite the processing and issuance of national and local permits, licenses, and certification in times of national emergency. Republic Act Number 11519, an act extending the availability of appropriations under Republic Act Number 11494, otherwise known as the Bayanihan to Recover as One Act, and Republic Act Number 11520, entitled An Act extending the availability of the 2020 appropriations to December 31, 2021, amending for the purpose Section 60 of the General Provisions of Republic Act Number 11465 or the General Appropriations Act of Fiscal Year 2020.
To the archives. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we are in receipt of the Bicameral Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 1945 and House Bill number 7904. This is the Strengthening the Anti-Money Laundering Act. With the permission of the body, Mr. President, may we recognize the chairperson of the Senate panel, no other than our chairman of the Banks and Financial Institutions, the Honorable Senator Grace Poe, to give us highlights of the report.
Senator Grace Poe is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. As chairperson of the Senate contingent to the Bicameral Conference on the proposed amendment of the Anti-Money Laundering Act, I now have the privilege to report to the body the approved version of the bill. There were many conflicting provisions between the Senate Bill number 1945 and House Bill number 7904. But through the hard work and perseverance of our colleagues, Senators Recto and Rilon as Senate conferees, and that of Representatives Kua, Kimbo, and Lacson as House conferees, we were able to reconcile these differences. The Bicameral Conference Committee agreed to use the House version as the working draft, and from there, the common and reconciled provisions were assimilated. Mr. President, among the agreements settled by the panel are the following. First, the Senate proposal that transactions in excess of 500,000 pesos of all offshore gaming operators or POGOs, as well as service providers, be included within the purview of AMLA, was readily accepted. This shows both the Senate's and the House's commitment in making sure that POGOs and service providers are regulated and are not made as avenues for nefarious activity in the country. Second, real estate brokers and developers are to be included as covered persons, but only for single cash transactions involving an amount in excess of 7.5 million pesos. This qualification sufficiently narrows down the burden repertorial requirements to the high-risk transactions that are usually flagged in money laundering regimes. Additionally, the proposed Senate amendment to increase the reporting threshold of the LRA from 500,000 to 5 million has been deleted to retain the current coverage. Third, it was agreed by the parties that the tax crime covered by the amendments shall be limited only to tax evasion as provided under Section 254 of the National Internal Revenue Code as amended. This is in line with the fact that tax evasion or the attempt thereof is the provision most correlated with the crime of money laundering. Fourth, After key negotiations, the panel agreed to provide additional but limited investigative powers to AMLC, such as the power to apply for the issuance of a search and seizure warrant before any competent court, as well as the power to apply for the issuance of subpoena with any competent court. This is in adherence to the key recommendation of the FATF APG, while at the same time still maintaining the integrity of the Constitution and our laws. Fifth, the panel has agreed to adopt the Senate proposals related to proliferation financing of weapons of mass destruction as provided under pertinent UN resolutions. These measures include the addition of certain terms and their definitions, the expansion of unlawful activities to include violation of Section 19(3) under the Strategic Trade Management Act, and the concretization of AMLC's power to implement targeted financial sanctions, including ex parte freeze without delay against those who are financing the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction related to the UN resolutions. These are in line not only with the recommendations from FATF-APG, but also from our commitment as a member of the international community. Six, the Senate provision on granting AMLC the additional power to preserve, manage, or dispose assets pursuant to a freeze order, preservation order, or judgment of forfeiture has been adopted. This provides AMLC with the necessary authority to enact measures that would otherwise prevent dissipation or depreciation of properties currently under its custody. Seven, the provision empowering AMLC to enlist the assistance of and/or direct any government agency or office in any anti-money laundering operations has been deleted, as this power is already existing under the present provisions of the AMLA. 8. The Senate and the House panel agreed to adopt the proposed section on information security and confidentiality. This would safeguard any information processed through AMLA and would deter AMLC staff and personnel from otherwise leaking or misusing information acquired by them by reason of their office. 9. The provision of the system of incentives and rewards was deleted by the panel in order to avoid confusion and to curtail possible legal implications from the proposed measure. 10. The panel decided to maintain the section on the non-intervention of BIR, with the addition of a new sentence allowing AMLC to coordinate with the BIR on investigations related to tax evasion under Section 254 of the NIRC as amended. This amended provision aptly provides for AMLC's ability to pursue investigations in coordination with BIR, while also maintaining AMLC's independence from BIR and vice versa. Finally, in the interest of expeditious implementation of this law, and in order to meet the deadline as imposed by the FATF-APG, the panel has adopted the present Act's immediate effectivity upon the completion of its publication. We were given a deadline of February, and I am proud to say that the Senate met its obligation. Mr. President, as discussed before, bills pertaining to the amendment of the AMLA have always had a difficult time during plenary, primarily because of two seemingly clashing ideals: the virtue of adopting provisions recommended by an international body in order to preserve the country's status as non-haven for money launderers, and the virtue of preserving our own set of rules away from the influence of these international bodies. It's always been a question of how much or how little we are willing to accommodate and the price thereof. The present set of amendments show us that it is possible, as it has always been, to find a middle ground. Though the relentless and skillful pursuit of experts like Senators Drilon and Recto in the Senate panel, and of our counterpart in Congress, we were able to chart a middle course that would help us both maintain our status in the international body while preserving the integrity of our current laws and legal system. These would in turn help our economy during these turbulent times of the pandemic and would especially be beneficial to our OFWs who would be most affected if the country sinks to the gray list. Thus, it is my humble submission that this bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 1945 and House Bill number 7904 on the amendments to the Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2001 as amended be ratified by this chamber. Maraming salamat po.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we approve and ratify the bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 1945 and House Bill number 7904. Let the text of the joint explanation be inserted into the records of the chamber, Mr. President. I so move.
Is there any objection? The chair hears none. The bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 1945 and House Bill 7904 is hereby adopted and ratified.
Thank you, dear colleagues.
Congratulations to our dear chairperson, Senator Grace po. And
Thank you.
Mr. President, I know we have two items on the agenda, but our dear colleague from Pampanga and Quezon City, Senator Kiko Pangilinan, Francis Kiko Pangilinan, would like to avail of the privilege hour, Mr. President. May we recognize our distinguished colleague, Senator Pangilinan.
Right, Senator Francis Pangilinan is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Senate President, Majority Leader, distinguished colleagues, good afternoon. I rise before you on a matter of personal and collective privilege. The issue facing us is just as important as the COVID vaccine and its prices, if not more so. Food, or more specifically, the rise in prices of food. For the past few weeks, at the start of the new year, the prices of a number of commodities in the markets have continued to soar. Hindi mapigilang mapaaray ang mga namamalengke dahil sa sobrang taas ng presyo ng mga bilihin. Hindi na malaman ng mga may bahay paano pagkakasyahin ang karampot na kinikita ni Mr. In its January 18 Bantay Presyo Monitoring 2 days ago, the Department of Agriculture reported the prevailing prices of the following items per kilo. Regular milled rice, 38 pesos. Galunggong, 280 pesos. Dressed chicken, 180 pesos. Liempo, 450 pesos. Talong, 200 pesos. Repolyo, 230 pesos. And siling labuyo, 1,000 pesos. Sabi na nga ng iba wag daw mamasamain kung pagdating ng Valentine's, isang supot ng sili ang pasalubong imbis na bulaklak. Dahil ibig sabihin daw nito, sobrang mahal talaga. Pero sa totoo lang, hindi na biro at hindi biro ang presyo ng mga bilihin. Sa mga karinderya, halos 20 pesos na ang takal ng kanin at ang sabaw na dating libre ay may bayad na. Maging ang gravy na ginagawang pangsabaw sa kanin ng ilang nating madiskarteng kababayan, may bayad na rin sa fast food. Sa gitna ng isang pandemyang nag-alis ng mga hanap buhay ng milyong-milyong mga kababayan natin, seryoso ang tanong, ano nga ba ang mabibili ng 500 pesos mo? Maraming memes at jokes ang umiikot sa social media. Dinadaan na lang ng ating mga kababayan sa biro ang ating pagkadismaya sa taas ng presyo ng bilihin. Pero seryosong bagay ito dahil ang usapin ng pagkain ay usapin ng sikmura, usapin din ng kalusugan. A survey of SWS last September 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, showed that families who experience involuntary hunger or hunger due to lack of food reached a new record high of 30.7%, or an estimated 7.6 million households. That is almost 1 in every 3 Filipinos. Habang tumataas ang presyo ng pagkain, lalo pang dadami ang magugutom. According to UNICEF, a third of children in the Philippines are stunted. Muli, 1 sa 3 bata ay nababansot. 30% ng ating mga anak ay bansot o nababansot. The Philippines ranks 5th among countries in East Asia and the Pacific region with the highest stunting prevalence and one of 10 countries with the highest number of stunted children in the world. The World Health Organization estimates that the COVID-19 pandemic may cause stunting among children under 5 years old if no mitigating interventions are put in place. Food prices are on the rise because food supply dropped due to, among others, the series of pandemic lockdowns. The successive typhoons in the last quarter of 2020 destroyed crops, and the African swine flu and the closed fishing season during the cold months made supplies of pork and fish and vegetables scarce. The effects of the African swine flu are devastatingly real for small-scale hog raisers, including broadcaster Cito Beltran, who shared in his column that after 15 years of breeding and raising domesticated and wild pigs, he had depopulated his backyard hog farm and lost 75 to 80 pigs in the process. He tells of others who have lost 1,700 to 6,000 pigs. Sabi nga niya, ASF ang COVID ng mga baboy. The rising food prices may also be due to the detrimental effects of the flood of imported goods or food imports. More Filipino farmers seem discouraged from planting after consecutive losses as cheaper food imports ease their produce out of the market. Despite the DA's decision in December to stop the issuance of rice import permits, our rice imports are expected to settle at 2.3 million metric tons, which most likely will still make the Philippines the world's #1 rice importer. Until the latter part of 2020, the poultry industry had already lost 95 billion pesos due to subsidized chicken imports, while domestic poultry feed sales lost another 14 billion pesos. As Majority Leader Mig Zubiri pointed out, from being a sugar exporter, the Philippines is now a sugar importer as farmers continue to suffer from the low sugarcane yield. Napakasakit kahit walang sakit. Dahil na rin sa pandemya, marami ang nawalan ng trabaho at nagsarang mga negosyo. Kung hindi namamalimos tulad ng mga jeepney driver, forced IF ang tawag o forced intermittent fasting ang maraming kababayan natin. Kumakain na lang kung meron, sumasala na sa oras ang marami. Kaya kung wala ng sweldong itataas, dapat siguro tutukan maibaba ang presyo ng mga bilihin. Alam ng mga kababayan natin na nagutom ang mas matinding kalaban kaysa sa COVID. Kaya nga noong mga unang buwan ng pandemic, marami ang naglalakad ng malayo, makapasok lang sa trabaho. Takot sila sa COVID, pero mas takot silang magutom ang kanilang mahal sa buhay, ang kanilang mga anak, ang kanilang mga sarili. These food supply shortages and the resulting hunger may cause greater and long-term devastation than the COVID virus itself. Hindi natin pwedeng sabihin sa mga kababayan natin na stay healthy habang hinihintay ang bakuna kung wala namang makain o kaya napakataas ng presyo ng pagkain. In fairness to DA Secretary Willie Dar, hindi naman siya natutulog sa pansitan. To stabilize the supply and price of pork, the DA is looking to increase shipments of hogs from Visayas, Mindanao, and other ASF-free areas or green zones in Luzon, while also encouraging pork imports from ASF-free countries. I also believe that he caused the President to sign this January 15, Executive Order number 123, retaining the tariff rate of imported mechanically deboned meat of chicken and turkey at 5% until the end of 2022. This would help ensure the continued supply at stable prices of canned and processed meat products. But as we regulate the food imports, we must also push for the fully and implement the Sagip-Saka law, which was signed in May of 2019. Republic Act 11321 is a comprehensive approach to the weak Philippine agriculture sector by, among other things, pegging the standard of success of agriculture not only to yields, irrigated lands, mechanized farms, as such results, but also to the incomes, general well-being of our farmers. Let us realize this by fully implementing Sagip-Saka or RA 11321. Kapag kumikita ang mga magsasaka, sila ay mas maengganyo magtanim at pag mas marami silang ani mas mababa ang presyo ng mga bilihin sa palengke. Let us recall that during the pandemic last year, agriculture was the only sector that grew. If this trajectory continues, agriculture could be a major driver of growth. It would give income to the farmers as well as increase food supply in the market, leading to lower prices and food for all. 3 birds with 1 stone. May pandemya man o wala, kailangan nating kumain. Kaya nandyan dapat ang sapat na supply ng pagkain na mabibili sa abot kayang halaga. Finally, this representation filed proposed Senate Resolution 618 seeking an inquiry in aid of legislation on the rising food prices with the end in view of determining other interventions that would help not just to stabilize prices, but to bring down prices to ensure that every Filipino consumer, especially the poor, have access to adequate and affordable food. I wish to thank the chairperson of the Committee on Agriculture and Food, Senator Cynthia Villar, who earlier this afternoon, just before we convened the plenary session, agreed to conduct hearings on the resolution. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader, and to our colleagues in the Senate. May God bless the Philippines and keep all our kababayans safe and healthy in the full sense of the word healthy. Maraming salamat at magandang hapon sa kanilang lahat.
Thank you, Senator
Thank you.
Pangilinan. Majority Leader.
Thank you very much to Senator Pangilinan. Very timely speech. He's absolutely correct. Prices of commodities have steadily started going up, and we have to focus on the problem at hand. And we'd like to refer his speech to the Committee on Agriculture, Mr. President, so that they may also start the hearings as soon as possible. Before I make the referral, I believe some of our colleagues would like to propound a few questions, starting with Senator Aimee, after with Senator Pia.
Mr. President, mine is not a question. I will wait for the hearing, but may I just make a motion to include for a joint referral to the Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovation, Future Thinking, because it covers Sustainable Goal number 2, Zero Hunger, Sustainable Goal number 3, Good Health and Well-being, Sustainable Goal number 8, Decent Work and Economic Growth, and Sustainable Goal number 9, Innovations. So may I make the motion, Mr. President?
I agree, Mr. President, as a
All right.
secondary committee.
Okay. In the meantime, before that we act on the motion, the Senator Amy Marcos is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. May I also inform the Committee on Agriculture as well as the Speaker on Senator Kiko Pangilinan that I filed a similar motion, including for that purpose, an invitation to the DTI in as much as they are required to enforce the price law. So, dapat kasama rin sila sa mga presyo kasi baka magkaturuan yung DA at sabihin na sa production at distribution sila, hindi sila may hawak ng mga presyo sa iba't ibang palengke. Maraming salamat, yun lang po.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I move that we refer the speech of the good gentleman to the Committee on Agriculture primarily and secondarily to the Committee of Senator P. Cayetano, which is the Futures Thinking Committee, Mr. President. So move.
Any objection? Chair hears none. So referred.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, for item number 1, for interpellation, I move that we consider Senate Bill number 1886 or resume consideration. This is under Committee Report 133. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration is in order.
This is an act further expanding the jurisdiction of metropolitan trial courts and municipal trial courts in cities, municipalities, and other areas. Mr. President, the sponsor of the measure may we recognize Senator Richard J. Gordon, and to interpolate, Mr. President, our distinguished birthday boy, Mr. President, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III.
Mr. President,
Yes, Senator Richard Gordon is recognized, the sponsor of the measure. And
I was
Senator
under
Coco
the impression that I was going to sponsor the judicial marshal's bill. That was what was requested.
We can reverse if the good gentleman, since the 2 items today are his babies, we can reverse it, Mr. President, so that he can sponsor first the judicial marshal's bill. No problem, Mr. President. Therefore, I withdraw my motion I withdraw my motion and I move that we transfer from the calendar of ordinary business to special order, Mr. President, Senate Bill number 1947, 1947. I so move.
Firstly, the motion is withdrawn.
Yes, Mr.
Secondly,
President.
motion to transfer. Any objection? Hearing none, so transferred.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we consider Senate Bill number 1947 as Secretary to read the title of the measure.
The Secretary will read the title of the measure for second reading.
Senate Bill number 1947, an act creating the Philippine Judicial Marshal Service, defining its functions and powers, appropriating funds therefore, and for other purposes.
Mr. President, may we recognize our distinguished colleague, Senator Richard J. Gordon, the chairperson of the Committee on Justice and Human Rights, to sponsor the said measure, Mr. President.
Partial service. May I ask the Secretary again to read the title of the measure? I think there was something different about it.
Senate Bill number 1947,
Oh,
an act creating the Office of the Judiciary Marshals, defining its functions and powers, appropriating funds therefore, and for other purposes.
yes. So we now recognize Senator Richard Gordon to sponsor the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon to our dear colleagues. It is a pleasure and an honor to be able to come up with another breakthrough bill for the judiciary, whose members have been under siege. Shakespeare talked about, and I quote, first thing is let's kill all the lawyers, Mr. President. The other day I was talking about lawyers being killed. Now I'd like to talk about judges being killed. And during the last several years, Mr. President, 39, kung di ako nagkakamali, ang 34 po na mga huwes ang pinapatay sa ating bansa. Alam po natin na pagka yan ay pinapatay, ibig sabihin, there is a failure of the country to protect its lawyer, its magistrates of the law, para tayong sinasampal sa muka ang Lady Justice at parang hindi na natatakot ang mga kriminal na pumatay ng mga huwes. So, Mr. President, it is important that we try to get this bill passed, and it is my hope that it will get the support, as this has been authored by yours truly under Senate Bill number 1181, and introduced also by our good friend Senator Pampilo Lacson under Senate Bill number 1209, and Senate Bill number 1237, sponsored by Ronald M. De La Rosa, happy birthday, and Senate Bill number 1255, introduced by the Right Honorable Senate President Vicente Soto. Mr. President, there have been many instances, and very recently, of killings of judges. Very recently, last November 11, 2020, a lady judge, no less, Teresa Abadilla of the Manila Regional Trial Court, Branch 45, was fatally shot inside her office in Manila. Now, Mr. President, one would wonder why her own clerk of court would shoot the lady judge inside her chamber. And perhaps if there was a judiciary marshal present there, that might have been prevented. But let me cite some of the cases that are really, really called to heaven for vengeance, Mr. President. When I first became senator, my first privileged speech in 2004 was over a judge, Voltaire Rosales, that was ambushed in Batangas Road, Mr. President. And the wife came to me, she's from Aklan, and immediately I delivered the privileged speech on this matter. And mercifully enough, about a few months later, through General Aglipay, they were able to trace the killer, who was an inmate, a drug pusher, a drug lord in Muntinlupa, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, if we look at other instances, Mr. President, you can see that apart from Voltaire Rosales, there are many, but I'll just cite some of the things that are really important. In my staff, they're all important, I'm sorry. In my staff, there's a lady who works for me, or with me for the last so many years. And her father was a judge, Mr. President, and he was working in Cagayan. The first attempt on Judge Nathaniel Patugalan occurred in Cagayan when he was driving to work or from work. And he was hit in the head and he was paralyzed after that. Hindi tumigil ho doon. Another attempt was made when he was transferred to Quezon City, and while on board a jeepney, a passenger jeepney, he was assassinated and killed on January 19, 2007. Today is the anniversary of that death, if I'm not mistaken, or yesterday was the anniversary of his death, Mr. President. Now, Mr. President, there are other instances. For example, Judge Erwin Alaba, and take note, this was done in Baler, Aurora, September 1, 2015. Walang patawad. Binaril po siya, tinamaan siya sa kanyang dibdib, at pati kanyang asawa na naandun sa kanyang kotse nung araw na yon ay binaril rin at wounded yung asawa. Pero patay po si Judge Alaba. And then, on the same month, November 11, just 2 months later, on November 11, Honorable Wilfrido T. Nieves was shot, multiple gunshot wounds to the head and right upper extremities. And, Mr. President, although the police arrested a certain J. Hoson for the murder, another suspect, Arnel Hanoras, pointed to the dreaded Raymond Dominguez as the one who instructed Dominguez, who led the gang involved in carnapping since 2010. They are known as the Dominguez brothers, Mr. President. And then you have another judge by the name of Honorable Edmundo Pintac, no less than the clerk of court of the Supreme Court, Maidas Marquez, referred to this gentleman who was riding on his way to Osami City and was shot dead. And guess by what? By motorcycle riding gunmen. And then you also have Raymar Lacaya from Zamboanga del Norte, who was shot dead right outside the courthouse. Sa labas ng hukuman, mga kapatid. Patay po siya. Ito masakit. Honorable Ezekiel Dagala, former Siargao MTC, November 1, was killed inside his home. Sa bahay po niya. In Surigao del Norte on November 1, 2019. Authorities said he was sleeping when 3 gunmen entered his room around 11 p.m. in Del Carmen town in Siargao Island and killed him, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, ilan lang yan? Si Judge Banyes, very recently, November 5, 2019, sa Ilocos Sur. He was killed by an unidentified gunman while on board his vehicle in Barangay Mamelta, San Fernando, La Union. Hindi ko na po sasabihin yung iba, but there seems to be a pandemic, hindi lang ng COVID, ngunit ng mga mamamatay ng mga West sa ating bansa. At wala tayong ginagawa, it seems, nahaya natin ang pulisya na silang bahala magtanggol sa judge at nahaya natin ang mga kinaukulan na isolve yung kanilang kaso at pinababayaan natin yung mga tao na yung mga West natin na lumakad na ini-expect natin na sila ay matibay, na hindi sila matatakot sa paghawak ng kanilang mga kaso na nasa harapan nila o nasa kanilang court. Hanggang ngayon po, only 23 cases were filed in court, 15 of which are on trial. Only 2 convictions at 6 pang acquittal. And with regards to the status of the suspects involved in these cases, ang PNP ang report, 47 suspects are still at large, 6 were already released, 26 are still detained, and 7 were killed. If our judges and our public officials are not safe in this country, if even our very own judges are not safe and cannot find justice for themselves, sino susunod sa ating bansa? Susunod ba yung mamamayan? Maglalakas ba na magtestigo yung mamamayan? Kahit na may nakita siya? pinapatay patiwas eh. Ang sinasabi ko lang po ay kailangan ay makita natin lahat na itong mga nangyayari ito sapagkat walang katarungan mangyayari sa isang bansa at kung walang katarungan ang bansa, ang tawag natin, there is no rule of law. Matatakot pati negosyante pumasok, kung pati mga West pinapatay, di lalo na yung mga negosyante. At narinig natin yung mga negosyante rin, pinag-iinitan rin niya, hinihingan ng pera, at marami pang naganap na mga krimen na nagaganap. Ito, i-focus lang po natin sa judges ngayon, sa pagkakataon ito. Ano po ang history ng judiciary marshals? In the United States, in the year 1789, President George Washington, the first American president, appointed the first 13 U.S. marshals following the passage of the first Judiciary Act. Alam po ba ninyo? Kaya hanggang ngayon, meron sila na Black Men Matter, Black Lives Matter. Ang ginamit itong U.S. marshals para arestuhin yung mga fugitive slaves, yung si Dred Scott, na isang naging mitsa ng Civil War, and returning them to their masters, to the in the enforcement of the law, to the pursuant of counterfeiters, ginagamit sila, in the confiscation of property, ginagamit sila, at saka to support the Confederacy. To the apprehension of many desperados such as the Dalton Gang, Bill Doolin, and Ned Christie. Hindi ko po kilala yan, ginawa lang ng aking staff at pinagtitiwalaan ko naman siya. And to the accompaniment and protection of federal judges from a threatened assault. Lahat na sinabi ay talagang mapapanindigan natin na yan ang kasaysayan ng judiciary marshals. Here in the Philippines, our bill's primary purpose is obvious, even to the layman. The protection of the judiciary. Not only the lives, but the integrity of the judiciary. So we are now in the cusp of creating the judiciary marshals that will be under the jurisdiction of ng ating kataas-taasan na hukuman, the Supreme Court, through the Office of the Court Administrator. The Office of the Judiciary Marshal shall be headed by the Chief Marshal and assisted by 3 Deputy Marshals who shall be in charge of Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. The Judiciary Marshal shall be primarily responsible for the security, safety, and protection of the members, officials, personnel, and property of the judiciary, including the integrity of the courts and their proceedings. Diyan natin makikita kung ano yung pinag-uusapan, integrity. Ayan, kasama na po dyan yung sa security, yung conduct thereat, yung assessment, at mag-imbestiga. Pangalawa, assist in the execution and implementation of court orders. Maraming hindi sumisipot na pulis o yung mga may mandamiento de aresto, hindi nahuhuli. Siguraduhin na payapa at secure at orderly ang conduct ng judicial proceedings. Baka may nagdididi pa doon, bigla na lang magwawala doon at mamumukpok. Pwedeng tawagin ng judge yung judiciary marshal. Manage and dispose of assets. Conduct investigations concerning allegations of irregularities, including graft and corruption, committed by justices, judges, court officials, and personnel. And manage and dispose of assets seized, frozen, and forfeited by courts. Malimit natin nakakalimutan yan, hindi katulad sa ibang bansa na nakukuha yung mga bahay ng mga kriminal, yung mga kotse, at sa Amerika pati aeroplano at mga barko nakukuha po. Yan, makakatulong ang judiciary marshals yan. Pag-i-issue po ng subpoena, pagbibigay ng mission orders and memorandum receipts, siyempre sa mga tauhan nila. Establish Judicial Marshal Academy. At saka umaresto at mag-conduct ng searches and seizures. Sa kasama dyan po ay access all public records of persons under investigation in confidence. Nasa kanila na, nasa korte sila, makakakuha sila ng access, mas madali, doon sa mga hinahanap at iniimbestiga. At siyempre, ito ay papasok sa tinatawag nating Secrets Act at the Privacy Act. Tapos, the Office of the Judiciary Marshal shall be comprised of the following division. Yung Protection Division, siyempre, tagapangalaga ng kaligtasan ng buhay ng mga judges, justices, court officials, and personnel and their families. Pangalawa, investigasyon, forensic and intelligence division. We shall undertake investigation and forensic analysis of crimes committed against justices, judges, court officials, and personnel and their families, including cold cases. D, legal division. We shall issue subpoenas for the appearance of persons for investigations. Take and require sworn statements from persons summoned in relation to cases under investigation. D, Information and Communications Technology Division, which shall establish and maintain an integrated, comprehensive, and state-of-the-art network of IT, electronics and communications equipment, and facilities to enable the office of the Judicial Marshal to perform its functions. It is the era of speed, Mr. President. Kaya kailangan nila meron din silang information technology na meron na rin naman ng Supreme Court. We must work together, therefore, to ensure that our judicial system is thoroughly respected, not only because of their position, but in order to operate a safe environment for the people in court, for the judges especially, for the witnesses, for the court personnel, and law enforcement must not have to face threats of violence when carrying out their duties, lalo na ang mga WES. These protections are crucial to the preservation of the independence of our judiciary so that it continue to serve as a bulwark protecting individual rights and liberty. Our mission here, therefore, is to provide the works. Our words must translate into deeds and meaningful reforms and resources. There must be no doubt that the state is resolute in making sure that the judges are rendered safe and that they are ready to go after any person who threatens or kills a judge up to the ends of the earth. Ito po ay parang lese-majeste na pagka pumatay ka ng judge, katulad ng mga unang panahon, ay para ka na rin pumatay ng pamilya o mga hari mismo o reyna. Sapagat ang judge ay dapat bigyan ng ganyang talagang proteksyon para talagang makalampag ang tapang nitong mga papatay sa kanila at matakot sila. With the creation of the judiciary marshals, ang mga kriminal na may masasamang balak sa ating mga West ay magdadalawang isip na matatakot na sila ngayon. Hopefully, sapagkat dumadami ang tinatawag nating cases of impunity. With this, we will send a strong message that you just cannot kill a judge. Hindi na kayo basta-basta makakapapatay ng mga West. Ngayon, the government will fight for its judges. The bill is one of the proposed reforms natin para bumilis ang katarungan. At ito po ay ini-endorse ng no less than the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Judge Diosdado Peralta. At lahat yan ay pinakiusapan na ako nung araw pa, pati yung pinalitan ni Chief Justice Peralta hanggang kay Tess de Castro, at saka yung si Justice na ngayon ay nasa DSIS, na walang iba kundi si Lucas Bersamin. At saka ngayon po, ang sasabihin ko lang po sa bandang huli, ay tapos na ang maliligayang araw. Hopefully, nitong mga taong ito, nakakala nila, napakatapang nila, na patraidor pumapatay. Sapagkat, kapag pasa ng ating batas, sasabihin ko po sa kanila, Fiat Justitia Ruat Celum. Let justice be done, though the heavens may fall. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we'd also like to recognize to sponsor the measure Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa to co-sponsor the measure, Mr. President.
Senator Ronald De Rosa is recognized. May we, Chair declares a suspension, 1 Senate minute. Leader move that the Senator Ronald De La Rosa be recognized to co-sponsor the measure. Senator Ronald De La Rosa is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the oldest federal law enforcement agencies in the United States of America is the United States Marshal Service. It was created in 1789 and primarily responsible for the protection of federal jurists, court officers, and other threatened persons in the interest of justice. Unfortunately, despite the number of judges killed in the country, we do not have yet a similar agency to the United States Marshal Service. It saddens me, Mr. President, that in the performance of their mandate in the proper dispensation of justice, their very own lives are put at stake. In fact, since 2016, at least 54 judges, prosecutors, and lawyers have already been killed. The last being Attorney Baby Maria Concepcion Landero Ola, who was gunned down last December 17, 2020 by unidentified men while driving her pickup truck along Danau City Highway in Cebu. Mr. President, I cannot overemphasize the importance of protecting our guardians of justice as they perform their sworn duty of upholding the Constitution and the laws of the country. With this in mind, I am privileged to co-sponsor Senate Bill number 1947 under Committee Report number 150, entitled An Act Creating the Office of the Judiciary Marshals, defining its functions and powers, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. As mentioned by our good chairperson of the Committee on Justice and Human Rights, Senator Dick Gordon, the objective of this bill is to establish the Office of the Judiciary Marshals under the Supreme Court through the Office of the Court Administrator. This office shall be primarily responsible for security, safety, and protection of the members, officials, personnel, and property of the judiciary, including the integrity of the courts and their proceedings. If enacted into law, the Office of the Judiciary Marshals will also have the power to conduct threat assessments and undertake investigations and forensic analysis of crimes and other offenses committed, including potential security threats against justices, judges, court officials, and personnel, and whole of justice, courthouses, and other court properties. They may coordinate with the law enforcement agencies to maximize the collection and sharing of intelligence information for purposes of identifying threats. Moreover, instead of delegating the Philippine National Police, the court martials shall assist the courts in execution of all lawful writ processes and judicial orders. We need to protect the lives of the persons necessary to the fair and impartial administration of justice in the country. The protection and preservation of our courts is the protection and the preservation of our democracy. We should all remember, judiciary is the last bastion of democracy. Sana wala ng mga judges na kayang-kayang tawagan at takutin ng mga drug lord na kahit nakapit na dyan sa bilibid, takutin yung mga huwes na magdesisyon sa kanilang mga drug cases in their favor. With the presence of these judicial marshals, will be there to protect our esteemed judges. In view of this foregoing, I urge this august body for the speedy passage of this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. To allow our colleagues to study this, but before we suspend consideration, Mr. President, many of us would like to be made co-authors with the permission of Senator Gordon. Yours truly, Mr. President, if I can be made a co-author together with Senator Pacquiao, Senators Villar, and Angara as well. Senator Recto as well would like to be made a co-author of the judiciary marshals. And as well, Senator Nancy Binay, I believe, also would like to be made a co-author of the measure. So with that, Mr. President, with that manifestation, we'd like to suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1947.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure is suspended.
Mr. President, we move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 1886 under Committee Report number 133.
Yeah. Yes, any objection? Hearing none, consideration is in order.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I mentioned earlier, this is the expanding jurisdiction of the Metropolitan Trial Courts. May we recognize our distinguished senator from Zambales, our chairperson of the Committee on Justice and Human Rights, no other than Senator Richard J. Gordon, to sponsor and to interpolate our distinguished colleague who's celebrating his birthday today, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III.
Yes, Senator Richard Gordon is recognized to sponsor the measure to interpolate the Senator Coco Pimentel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just as a humble information, we have already sponsored this. We are ready to take questions, Mr. President. I believe my good friend Senator Coco is celebrating his birthday. Is going to interpolate me, Mr. President, if he still so wishes.
Yes, he is. He has prepared to interpolate. He is prepared to interpolate. Session suspended for a few minutes. 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the sponsor, our chairman of the Committee on Justice, very active, diligent, and imaginative senator, accept a few or entertain a few clarificatory questions?
Willingly, Mr. President, to my good friend Senator Senator Pimentel, who I deeply respect for his intelligence, mathematical wizardry, and certainly his ability to interpret the law.
Thank you, Mr. President. The measure we are discussing, which is Senate Bill number 1886, looks like a simple bill, but I believe this will have serious implications, Your Honor, on the progress of cases in court, as I think this touches on the jurisdiction of the first level and second level courts. May we know from the sponsor what are the new ideas contained in the said measure?
President, it really is part of a strategy of the Judiciary Committee to unload the courts. For example, we decided that we would have arresto mayor be given instead the penalty of voluntary service, Mr. President. And then, of course, now on this particular instance, the regional trial court's jurisdiction, which is really overloaded. And if you look at the statistics, they really are so heavily overloaded. And we believe that the municipal trial courts can take the slack because the municipal trial courts are not that overloaded at all. And that will mean that there will be the RTC will free up itself from the severe overload. For example, Mr. President, the backlog of cases continues to rise. In the case since 1991, around 437 regional trial courts, 51 metropolitan trial courts, and 26 municipal trial courts have been created, and yet the backlog of cases continues to rise. As of 2018, there are 21,169 pending cases in the first level courts. That's the municipal trial court, Mr. President. While there are 108,484 pending cases in the second level courts. Data would show that the first level courts have lower caseload and a higher disposition rate than the second level courts. In addition, a significant amount is needed to create new courts. Based on data provided by the Office of the Court Administrator, the following amounts are needed in creation of a new courts. Creation of new courts is costly and can only do so much, and thus shifting some of the caseload from the second level courts to the first level courts would ease the burden of the second level courts and allow them to dispose cases more efficiently, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So the main objective of the law of the measure is to redistribute the caseload of RTCs to the MTCs so that to make them more reasonable, realistic. So may we know, Mr. President, as of the moment, as of existing law and procedure, what is the average caseload for RTCs, and then what is the average caseload for the MTCs?
In 2018, Your Honor, the first level courts had 108,484 pending cases. In the second level courts.
Sir.
Second level courts.
Second level,
And
yes.
then on the other hand, the first level courts as of 2018 only have 21,169. Unfortunately, that is the only data that we have gathered from the Supreme Court, Mr. President. And I assume that it would even go bigger unless we do something about it. And we're not going to give them heavy cases anyway. These are cases that the municipal trial courts can easily handle, Mr. President.
Okay. So maybe we can just divide the number of pending cases with the number of RTCs, and then the number of pending cases at the first level with the number of MTCs. Then we can get the average caseload. So when we now redefine the jurisdiction of the MTC by increasing certain amounts, we expect, of course, the cases which now fall under the jurisdiction of the RTC to then fall under the jurisdiction of the MTC. So,
as far as civil cases are concerned, that will be the one transferred to the municipal level courts, Mr. President. Some of the civil cases.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, Your Honor. Criminal cases will stay with the second level courts. Based on the penalties, Mr. President.
Do we have, sir, a projection, Mr. President, of, let's say, what percentage of pending RTC cases would be affected by the change in the jurisdictional amount?
Yes, Your Honor. 90% of the civil cases in RTCs surveyed involve amounts not exceeding 2 million. So those cases not exceeding 2 million will go down to the municipal trial courts. There are 5,354 cases filed involving civil actions, probate proceedings, and admiralty and maritime proceedings With the proposed amendment, therefore, 129 under BP 129, 4,792 cases would have gone to the first level courts. 76% of the civil cases involve property with assessed values of not exceeding 400,000. Now, inflation and the years have already practically diminished that value in terms of previous values in the past. There are 2,540 civil cases filed involving Title II or possession of real property, and with the amendment of BP 129, 1,922 cases would have gone to the first level courts. Mr. President, there would have to be, I believe, and this is based on the survey conducted by the Office of the Court Administrator on civil cases filed in 2019 for 342 RTCs from all over the country, Mr. President.
Mr. President, may we know why the value for the civil actions which involve title to real property, the amount of 400,000 was used as the threshold amount, while for the rest of the different kinds of cases, the threshold amount is 2 million pesos. Why the difference, Mr. President?
Mr. President, first of all, this is recommended by the OCA, Mr. President, the Office of the Civil Administration, Office of the Court Administration, I'm sorry. And below are the fair market value and assessment levels of land, Mr. President. For example, in Quezon City, the land type residential, commercial, and industrial, the range of the base unit value for residential is 3,000 to 25,000, 5% assessment. In the case of commercial, it's 15,000 to 40,000, or 14% assessment. And in the case of industrial, it's 12,000 to 18,000, or 14%. Now, in the case of Parañaque, based on their ordinances, again, range of base unit value for residential is 1,200 to 7,000, or an assessment of 20%, and commercial 3,000 to 20,000, or 50%. In the case of industrial, it's 3,000 to 5,000, or a value of 50%. Now, in the case of Santa Rosa, Laguna, Mr. President, going down south, residential would be in the area of 1,620 to 8,560, or 13%. The commercial would be 5,560 to 10,570, or 28%. And the industrial would be 1,935%. Meaning to say, the mean value of the property within and outside Metro Manila, Mr. President, has been considered insofar as the computations are concerned. And so, I would just like to point out that mataas ang assessed value, kailangan i-update na natin yung jurisdictional amount so the courts can keep up, Mr. President, among other things. Besides, the last time the jurisdictional amounts were increased was in 2004 as per circular number 2199. The jurisdictional amounts are now outdated. Increasing the jurisdictional amounts would also allow the Supreme Court to increase the jurisdictional amounts for small claims which are summary in nature.
I've noticed, Mr. President, that the amendment will also do away with the distinction of the location of the property. Current law distinguishes whether the property is within Metro Manila and outside, and then this measure now will do away with such a distinction. Is that correct? As I understand the
Yes,
measure.
sir, there will be no more distinctions, Mr. President. This will help us speed up the handling of the courts of the cases, Mr. President.
And then one new feature, Mr. President, is the grant of jurisdiction now to the first level courts in admiralty and maritime actions.
Yes, Your
Where the
Honor.
demand, yes, so that is a new feature, Mr. President, right?
That is
Because
correct, Your Honor.
current law reserves this for the RTCs.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. Sige. Mr. President, Senator Tolentino.
with the permission of the birthday celebrant, if the
Tolentino.
sponsor would allow me to make some interjections. Following the initial questioning of the gentleman from Cagayan de Oro, the premise given by the sponsor is that he is supporting the downloading because of the heavy workload of the regional trial courts now to the MTC of cases. He mentioned several instances a while ago, but in this specific instance of Admiralty law, may we know from the sponsor, how are we really overloaded with Admiralty cases? Because it would appear, Mr. President, that maritime cases is a specialized form of law involving contracts, international law, sea accidents, collisions, piracy, and this is not your normal case that usually would burden a regional trial court. And Senator Pimentel is very well aware of this, he being our co-author of a measure emanating from a previous maritime incident which grabbed the headlines months ago. So Admiralty cases are really few cases. Are we really, may we know the reason, the rationale of why there is an attempt on the part of the sponsor to have this downloaded to the MTCs, considering that these are few cases, specialized cases requiring specialized training for judges, and as we stand today, there are only 10 specialized Admiralty courts, as mentioned by the Supreme Court in a circular issued just last year, Mr. President. What is the real reason for this? May we know from the sponsor.
Reasons are real. They're not made up, Mr. President.
Medyo mahaba. What is the reason for downloading Admiralty cases, a specialized branch of law, to the MTCs?
Mr. President, we're all lawyers, and as we know where the law is, and we know how to interpret laws. So a municipal trial court would have the only definition there would be in the length of service of their practice, Mr. President, before they're appointed, which is a limitation of 5 years. In the case of the municipal the RTCs, they have 10 years. Now, Mr. President, I don't see any difference in the sense that in the appreciation of law, na mahihirapan yung judge kung meron ganon sa Admiralty cases. In fact, we are an archipelagic country, and we have boats sinking. And besides, there's a limit to 2 million. So 2 million lang sa Admiralty courts sa cases, ang bababa sa civil courts. Doon sa taas, RTC pa, pag mataas doon. So it will be good for us because we will have lawyers who will be adequately prepared when they're promoted to RTC. Mas malaki na yung figures doon.
Yes, Mr. President. So one last point, Mr. President. So this, it would appear it would run counter to the previous rationale of unloading and burdening regional trial courts because of the heavy caseloads. Because as I repeat again, records will show perhaps that we have few, very, very few, if at all there are pending Admiralty or maritime cases, and to apprise this chamber, the current status is that Admiralty courts are based on the existence of ports. So you have the port of Cebu, you have the port of Davao, you have the port of Manila, and the Supreme Court, in a really wise decision, enshrined Admiralty courts in this where the ports are located, Mr. President. So we now have, with this measure, we now have a dispersal of Admiralty courts, which would be beyond the purview or jurisdiction of the ports that I mentioned a while ago. Will this not result in an administrative confusion insofar as coordinating executive issuances with judicial issuances? My last point, Mr. President.
Mr. President, thank you very much for your question, and of course you're correct. It would appear that only 10 Admiralty cases are existing and that it would not reduce the backlog there is really no backlog in the case of admiralty cases. But upon the other hand, the consideration of the jurisdiction really applies to the 2 million threshold, Mr. President. For my part, I personally feel that the more judges get involved with admiralty cases, the better for us. For example, yung binangga ng Chinese dyan sa bandang Mindoro, dapat yan kung below 2 million yan, hawakan na ng lower court doon. Ang dami natin mga bangka, mga basnig na nababangga kumisan o lumulubog o nagkakaroon ng kaso. I don't mind having the municipal trial courts learn their admiralty courts. Like I said, that's why they have staff. That's why they have to be accepted to the practice of the law. And for the same reason na tayo mga lawyers, we go through 8 years of studying and then 1 year of the bar. If you are lucky, like you and I, we took the bar once, and Senator Drilon only had to look at the examiner and he passed already. Mr. President, of course, I'm just jesting, but you know, many of the municipal trial courts should be really able to handle these cases. I would not, hindi ko mumurahan yung kakayahan nila. Ang nakikita ko dyan yung sinasabi natin, of the 5,354 cases filed involving civil actions, probate proceedings, and admiralty courts proceedings, 4,792 cases would have gone to the first level courts with the proposed amendment of BP 129. So malaking bawas, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Perhaps before the period of amendments, I will have to consult the chair of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, because there is a pending measure which is about to sponsor, perhaps within the next few days, which is likewise intertwined with this measure, involving, as it does, international relations, torts, contracts, and the realm of admiralty law. But I'd like to thank the sponsor for allowing me to interject, and Senator Pimentel as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. This representation is happy for the comments made by Senator Tolentino, and they're welcome, and is welcome to make any amendments. I can see my good friend Senator Drilon waving his hand, Mr. President.
Senator Drilon, the minority leader, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman yield the floor to a few questions for clarification?
Always, Your Honor, to the gentleman from Iloilo and the minority leader.
First of all, let me express my appreciation to the sponsor for taking time to help our judiciary in its problem of caseloads between the or among the lower courts. And in my experience, we do this regularly. And in this particular bill, Mr. President, is it correct to say that this the jurisdictional amounts, etc., were done in close consultation with the Supreme Court and the Office of the Court Administrator?
With my
Before you answer, the sponsor, is this related to the question being asked? Because Senator Pimentel has the floor. He is interpolating.
I'm sorry.
These are interpolators that are being interjected into the topic. Then we will allow it. If this is another set of interpolations, we will have to ask the permission of Senator Pimentel.
I am withdrawing. I'm willing to wait. I thought that, you know, with Senator Tolentino having the floor, I thought he was already interpolating. So when he finished, I withdraw. I will take the appropriate time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Tolentino merely interjected. No?
Thank you,
Senator Pimentel, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President.
I apologize to Senator Pimentel. I thought Senator Drilon was giving a follow-up to Senator Tolentino. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, but the point being pursued by the minority leader, I will also pursue, Mr. President. For example, what if we raise the 400,000 pesos threshold amount for civil actions involving title to or possession of real property or any interest therein to 2 million also, to make the amount standardized? Because I I think if we make it 400,000, then most of the cases would still fall under the RTC jurisdiction, because a lot of most of the real properties are, I think, costing more than 400,000 pesos.
Though there is a provision, Mr. President, that there is an indexation of the values every 5 years, I am almost tempted to say yes to you, Mr. President, because I think that would clear the air as far as doubts are concerned. And as you know, I try to be as practical as we can, because sometimes the bureaucratic suggestions that happen, Mr. President, that are always coming into the picture is diminished. Actually, the indexation adds about 100,000 every 5 years, which I personally feel is not enough. But that is the recommendation of the Office of the Court Administrator. But I think the wisdom of Senator Pimentel is ideal, and I don't really see any distinction between an appointment of a municipal trial court. In the past, even if you had less experience, you would be appointed to RTC. So today, there are more lawyers, and I think they should be able to handle it. And besides, there are now restrictions or monitoring on the part of the Supreme Court on the performance of many of the judges in the municipal trial court, which means that they can be prodded into performing or aiming higher or working harder, Mr. President, which should not be a difficult task to do, Mr. President.
Mr. President, since you mentioned the Section 3, which you term to be the indexation of the jurisdictional amount, this is the section where actually I have some reservation. I have some worries here, Mr. President, because it says that 5 years from the effectivity of the act, and every 5 years, the amounts will be increased by 100,000. So the increase in the jurisdictional amount can no longer be found in the law, but it will be found in some other issuance or promulgation that these are the new jurisdictional amounts. So I think, in my opinion, this will lead to more cases in the future arguing whether or not a case has been properly filed in this MTC or RTC, because someone would claim that the jurisdictional amount has changed. So I'm worried about indexing jurisdictional amounts. The jurisdictional amounts for the jurisdiction of our courts must be easily found in law and not easily changed, because this will lead to confusion. That is my opinion, Mr. President.
Very well taken, and I thank the gentleman for his suggestion, Mr. President. But I must remind also that the indexation is automatic, Mr. President. Under Section 5, also of Republic Act 7691, if I'm not mistaken, after 5 years from the effectivity of this act, the jurisdictional amounts mentioned in Section 19, subsection 3 and 4 and 8, and Section 33 of Batas Pambansa Bilang 129, as amended by this act, shall be adjusted to 200,000 pesos. 5 years thereafter, such jurisdictional amount shall be adjusted further to 300,000 pesos, provided, however, that in the case of Metro Manila, the above-mentioned jurisdictional amounts shall be adjusted after 5 years from the effectivity of this act to 400,000 pesos, Mr. President. So there is automatic indexation, and certainly there is always an eye on the rising of property values, Mr. President. However, if we feel that we can be comfortable with raising the values, I'm willing to support your suggestion, Mr. President, so long
Yes,
as that is clear to us. That really, the backlog is in the civil cases. And really, the backlog is a litong value eh. Kung 400,000 lang or maliit masyado yung value. Kaya the more they bite into it, so long as it's not too big, to prevent corruption, if you were worried about wet behind the ears judge na hindi niya kaya or baka matutukso, I think that like I said, we can stick to the original, but my own intuition is that this will become quickly passé, Mr. President. So I would be willing to accept any amendment from yours truly, Your Honor, from the gentleman from Cagayan de Oro and Quezon City and Marikina, if you're going to make that proposal, Mr. President.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Sponsor. So at the proper time, I will propose that we stick to the old way of doing things, of enumerating the jurisdiction by being categorical and clear about it and avoid the indexation to avoid confusion in the future. So at any rate, future Congresses can propose adjustments in the amount, just as what we are doing right now, that we are proposing adjustments to some amounts, Mr.
The
President.
only reservation I have there, Your Honor, is that it will depend on the Congress. And
Yes.
if they don't pay attention to this, we will be in suspended animation or practically frozen in time. At magtatagal, it's not easy to pass a bill in both houses, Mr. President, and that's my concern.
We just have to trust, Mr. President, that the future Congresses will be as sensitive as us in addressing the needs of our people, especially our justice system. So
I will remind the good senator that this is the first time that we're adjusting this since 2004. That was almost 16 years ago. So I'm worried about whether future Congresses will be as industrious as we are. Mr.
let us
President.
hope that they will be. And so ang partner ng discussion pala natin, sir, is voters education, and to ensure the election of responsible, sensitive, and diligent legislators or lawmakers.
I will kneel down to the altar of the Lord to bless us with people who will discern to elect proper officials in this country, Mr. President.
So and then Section 4 talks about provides for the transition. I think, Mr. President. So I also fear that if this measure becomes a law, there might be some confusion if we allow. No, it is not allowing. If we require the transfer of civil cases which have not reached the pre-trial stage, so why not just allow the civil cases which have been filed to at the proper court at the time that they were filed to continue under the jurisdiction of the said court, Mr. President?
It is very possible, Mr. President. We're trying to leverage the Supreme Court's capability because, after all, they were the ones desirous of making the change. And we are desirous of that change as well. Baka pag tumagal yan, makakalagkad na naman yung kaso na matagal. Pero pagka pumasok na ang Korte Suprema, palay ko mas bibilis, Mr. President. So under the same provision, the Supreme Court shall define the administrative procedure for the transfer of cases affected by the redefinition of jurisdiction to the Metropolitan Trial Courts, the municipal trial courts in cities, municipal trial courts, and municipal circuit trial courts. As far as I'm concerned, like in the FDA the other day, I said, kung ang FDA ang talagang binigyan ng authority, then pakinggan natin sila. Pag nagkamali, kasuhan. Ito rin naman ganun din dito. Kung ang Supreme Court ang siyang in charge of the courts, then they're the ones responsible for the speedy administration of justice and the discipline of judges. I would trust the Supreme Court rather than roll the dice and hopefully kung may confusion man, they can untangle that.
Kasi, sir, ang isang problema ngayon sa justice system natin is the delay. Ngayon, from the point of view of the litigant, at the time he filed the case, it was at the proper court. And then the case has not yet reached pre-trial stage, and then this measure becomes law. the one filed with the RTC shall, according to the law, shall be transferred to the MTC, now causing further delay. But if we avoid the Section 4 mentioning the mandatory transfer, that means we will allow the court where it was filed correctly at the time when it was filed to just continue taking cognizance of the case. So is that not a better scenario, sir, than requiring the transfer of cases? Because as you've stated, maybe 90% of some kinds of cases will be affected in the change of the jurisdictional amount.
I can see the prescience of your observation, Mr. President. But at some point in time, change must arrive, and if we don't change, it might drag on again, Mr. President. However, under the old law, if I may say, Republic Act 7691, it only applies to those cases that have not reached pre-trial stage. Perhaps we can do the same thing here.
Yes, that is what is provided, sir, in the measure that we are considering, Section 4. Yeah.
That's what I'm suggesting, Mr. President.
Yes. So that's why I'm proposing another idea that we do not touch the cases which have been properly filed when they were filed. They were filed in the right court. So let's just continue with the jurisdiction acquired by the old court to decide the case. So.
Well, if that's the case, Mr. President, as we go along, there will be new cases that will go now to the municipal trial court na mga 200,000 dadagdag yon, no? So mabuti nang alam nila na matatransfer sa kanila yung mga bagong cases. However, let us study that matter. If the gentleman can give us a very cogent proposal, I'm not adverse to such a proposal, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will study the two concepts. Number one, the mandatory transfer of cases not yet in the pre-trial stage, and number two, the Section 3 on the indexation of the jurisdictional amounts. So, because the sponsor has said that he has an open mind to the counter proposals or counter ideas that I have espoused, Mr. President.
That's the beauty of the Senate, Mr. President. We should always be open to each other, but at some point in time, we will have to make a decision based on the collective vision of the plenary.
Kasi galit na naman sila sa ano. So that would be all, Mr. President. Mr. Sponsor, thank you for your patience. Thank you for the time you've given me. Thank you very much.
Well, it was my pleasure, Mr. President. Thank you.
Yes,
Senator Tolentino seeking the floor. Go ahead.
just a quick manifestation, an afterthought, so to speak, Mr. President, related to what I interjected earlier concerning the Admiralty jurisdiction. Perhaps, Mr. President, for the record, there is reason to believe that the Supreme Court before, and I'm speaking of 2019, really meant to have just 10 Admiralty courts for the entire country, even if we have a long shoreline, because, Mr. President, the presence of 10 Admiralty courts in 10 ports would probably be related to the presence of other administrative agencies such as the Philippine Port Authority, the Philippine Coast Guard, because a ship is really destined to go to a port. And it's really reasonable to think that that port should have an Admiralty court. And that port would be the recipient of advance notices containing cargo documents, bill of lading documents, cargo manifest, and all contracts related to shipments. And this will go to a port of Manila, port of Cagayan de Oro, port of Cebu, port of Davao. And it is correct that and reasonable to have the port, the Admiralty Court, be situated where the port is located, Mr. President, and that is the present situation. The Admiralty courts, the regional trial courts are situated in the major ports. So by distributing this to the various municipal trial courts, we might be dispersing the Admiralty jurisdiction, which is correct, but the materials related to big cargo documents, shipping materials, will be destined to the big ports where the PPA is tracking them. The Bureau of Customs would be tracking them. The Coast Guard would be tracking them. So in terms of synergy, with all due respect, perhaps during the period of amendments, the present setup is correct. Limit the number of Admiralty courts to the RTCs located where the ports are located. Just a manifestation, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Right,
I believe,
minority
Mr. President, Senator Drilon would like to also seek the floor.
All right, the Minority Leader, Senator Drilon, is recognized to continue with the interpellation.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. To the gentleman from Zambales and sponsor of this measure, yield the floor to a few questions.
Willingly, Your Honor.
Mr. President, first of all, let me spread into the record my commendation to the good sponsor for taking time out again to sponsor this measure, which would require a lot of hard work, a lot of study, and consultation with the Supreme Court. And for the record, the power of Congress to define the jurisdictions of the courts is based on the Constitution, specifically Article 6, Section 2, which says that, quote, the Congress shall have the power to define, prescribe, and apportion the jurisdiction of the various courts. That is why we are tackling this bill, because of the problems that we face in terms of the distribution of the cases among the inferior courts. First, we note that, can we get a clarification on what the gentleman said about the indexation of the value of the case in litigation every 5 years, of the property in litigation every 5 years? Can I have a clearer understanding of that, Mr. President?
Well, Mr. President, the indexation is the standard by which the Supreme Court suggested that every 5 years we can make a review as to whether the limitations or the maximizations are still practical. And I suppose that that would be the nearest way upon which you can really say, okay, we have to review every 5 years because, you know, values might have gone up or values, we have to make the adjustments on the courts.
All right. So naturally, we have to closely consult with the Supreme Court on the matter of defining the jurisdiction of the inferior courts, because this is needed for a better administration of justice, which is the duty and obligation of the court. Would the gentleman agree with that, Mr. President?
Very much so, Mr. President. That's why we have a Judicial Bar Council to make sure that we help the Supreme Court recommend the proper judges and justices who will occupy our courts.
Yes. And yet, as the gentleman said earlier, it's not easy to pass a bill. In other words, you know, there are the legislators, there are two houses of Congress, and the reality is we rely on the advice of the court administrator and the Supreme Court, because they are better equipped to tell Congress, as our resource persons, what should be the apportionment of the jurisdiction of the lower courts. Would the gentleman agree with that, Mr. President?
Very much so, Your Honor. In fact, in my duties as Judicial Bar Council representative of the Senate, I have been very aggressively asking the courts what they need, because sometimes nagkakahiyaan eh. So we're very close to one another. We talk about the problems, and that's why we've come out with many initiatives in the court to foster a smoother administration of justice. The gentleman is correct.
Yes, Mr. President. Nevertheless, since it is accepted that the expertise insofar as this is concerned is in the Supreme Court, we rely on their advice to us. And in fact, it is that easy to make adjustments. As the gentleman said, the last time adjustments on the jurisdiction was made, this was in 2004. 2004. That's what, 15 years or so ago. And which brings me to the point. Is the gentleman open to the proposition that we should delegate this power to the Supreme Court, the power of determining the jurisdiction of the lower courts?
Well, the Supreme Court has control of all the courts, Mr. President, under the Constitution. The Congress shall have the power to define, prescribe, and apportion the jurisdiction of the various courts, but may not deprive the Supreme Court of its jurisdiction over cases enumerated in Section 5 hereof. No law shall be passed reorganizing the judiciary when it undermines the security of the tenure of its members, Mr. President. So we must have a healthy respect for what the Constitution provides in terms of interdepartmental or co-equal branch of government.
Mr. President. But the Constitution does not prohibit Congress from delegating that power to the Supreme Court as long as the parameters are well defined. What are the strong standards for the Supreme Court to exercise that power to redefine the jurisdiction of the inferior courts as delegated as an exercise of the delegated power of Congress? Conceptually, our question is, conceptually, would the chairman of our committee of the judiciary open to a review of this concept of delegating the power to define the jurisdiction of the inferior courts, delegating it to the Supreme Court?
With all due respect, Mr. President, it sounds very good in theory, but certainly this is a co-equal branch of government, and the Constitution requires us to follow a strict interpretation. And that is why I'm happy that the Supreme Court was proactive here, because in our discussions during lunch, when we have Judicial Bar Council meetings, we talk about how we can reduce the burden of the courts. And certainly, in this particular case, both representatives of the court and this representation are of the opinion that these are things that we can do. But normally, I would be hesitant to try and delegate, because normally the delegation is usually done by the Senate or by the Congress to an administrative agency. But to do it to a co-equal branch of government might be a stretch insofar as I'm concerned, because they also have their own legal minds. I don't know if we can do that really, actually.
Well, first of all, the response to that, Mr. President, to this idea, we can consult the Supreme Court if this can be done. They are the ones who will determine whether it is constitutional or not, and we assume that they will also review this. I broached this to this Chief Justice during the budget hearings, given my experience in defining the jurisdiction of the courts. And my view, Mr. President, is that we are just delegating the determination of the jurisdictional amounts.
That's correct.
Nothing else. We let the Supreme Court decide, because they are the ones who would have expertise on this. Decide on the jurisdictional amounts. Nothing else. Nothing beyond that. And we can impose standards, as you have mentioned, that it should be based on the indexation over a fixed period, so that the clear standards is there for the Supreme Court to exercise the delegated power of determining the jurisdiction by determining the jurisdictional amounts that each court level would have jurisdiction over, because that's the reality. The Congress would consult the Supreme Court, and as a matter of courtesy would respect the views of the Supreme Court. So maybe there is reason for us to really take a second look at this and delegate it to the Supreme Court. I can appreciate that this needs additional studies and extensive studies, because these are concepts which are new. I don't, but we are here to examine all concepts. I have no objection to the passage of this bill. Let me make it a record. I am using this opportunity just to find out the opinion of our respected, esteemed chairman of the Judiciary Committee, how he feels about this concept of delegating to the Supreme Court the determination of the jurisdictional amounts under certain clear standards, so that it doesn't have to go back and to the Congress every time to figure out what is the jurisdiction amount, which we have to, which we admit we are not technically equipped as maybe an economist, or and insofar as determining the case loads, we still rely on the Supreme Court. All I'm saying is maybe conceptually it's about time that we review and re-examine this concept and examine the possibility of delegating to the Supreme Court the determination of the juridical amount of the jurisdictional amounts, so that it can be so that the jurisdiction in effect of the inferior courts can be determined upon certain standards. That is our submission, Mr. President. As we said, we're just picking the brain of the good sponsor whether he's open to this, and we have no amendment, we have no objection to the bill being presented, because we realize that this is done in close consultation with the Supreme Court, and certainly it will help in the declogging of the court docket by apportioning the jurisdiction to the appropriate inferior courts. That's our submission, Mr. President.
Appreciate the comments of my good friend and respected colleague. Certainly his experience in all the branches of government that he has served, except the judiciary, really shows and is very important to this representation. I cannot fault the logic, Mr. President, except perhaps I will take the suggestion at heart and talk to the Office of the Court Administrator and even to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who is not unfriendly to the Senate, especially to the Senate President.
Yes.
And to you, they respect you very much. And certainly, when we do that, we can consider that, although, of course, there is also a delineation in the powers of the Supreme Court in the Constitution that that is there, exercise regional jurisdiction, etc., etc. I don't see this one there. That's why I would, out of a healthy respect for your comments and for the Supreme Court, it would be a good idea for us to consult again and say,
yes,
are you okay with that?
Yes, Mr. President, I said so, that we should consult them. But reality is, they are human beings, and I do not know. I would like to think that they would look at this proposal favorably for a better as a means of better administering the courts. The Supreme Court anyway has exercised their discretion, particularly in the procedure in the courts through the rules of court, and even defining the writ of kalikasan. If you look at it, Mr. President,
that's right.
It's not contained in any law. they defined it. The writ of kalikasan, not unlike, say, writ of habeas corpus or the other writs which we know traditionally, is not in any law. But the Supreme Court said, okay, we now have a writ of kalikasan, which will enable us to examine whether or not a particular act of of another branch of government is consistent with environmental laws, etc. So that I just see this as an indication of their openness to change concepts for the betterment of the rule of law. Anyway, Mr. President.
I hope our colleagues are all listening, because this is a very important fine points of law that we're discussing. And certainly, in my limited knowledge of the law, Mr. President, I think that the Court of the Kalikasan, and every time the Supreme Court makes a decision, they're also amending the law or legislating new law. That is another
Yes.
that's another business of the court. And so I like the idea. It's very novel, it's very imaginative, and certainly I will commit to say within the week or next week we shall try and use your name, and try not to use the name of the Senate President in vain when I say the Senate would like to express its sense on what the advice of the Supreme Court would be in terms of a delegation such as this, Mr. President. Because really, we are the ones that create courts, and the Supreme Court only provides us. And besides, Mr. President, this law essentially came from them, and that's why it was very, very speedily undertaken. And besides, Justice Peralta is already retiring. I don't know why he is prematurely retiring, but I'm sure he would like to have this feather in his pocket when he retires.
Yes, we're not creating courts, Mr. President. We are just delegating the determination of the jurisdictional amounts
Yes.
to the courts created by Congress.
Yes.
So
That's
anyway,
clearly understood.
yeah. So, Mr. President, with that, I thank the good sponsor for sharing his time and his valuable opinion on this issue, which we are bringing to the floor in our desire to help in the administration of justice by having an equitable and reasonable distribution of the cases among our inferior courts. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, the good sponsor.
I thank you. I thank the Minority Floor Leader, Nana Pimentel, and I'm sorry, Coco Pimentel and Senator Tolentino. This really enriches the debate, and I appreciate it, Mr. President.
Senator
Mr.
Tiveros
President.
is taking the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President, and to the good sponsor, not an interpellation, just a brief interjection in connection with the just concluded interpellation of the Minority Leader. I'd like to reassure the good sponsor, Mr. President, that indeed I am one of the members of our chamber who is following this interpellation with great interest. And in particular, Mr. President, I really appreciate the mention that the Minority Leader made of the writ of kalikasan, because it reminds us of what former Chief Justice Panganiban was writing about in several of his columns just a few years ago, about what he called the 3 generations of reforms that the Supreme Court has sponsored. That writ of kalikasan, including the principle of intergenerational responsibility, also very familiar to Senator Cynthia, was the 3rd generation of reforms championed by the Supreme Court. The first was on the human rights. For example, the writ of habeas data, in addition to the writ of habeas corpus. And the second was to advance justice for the poor through innovations like their justice on wheels, to dispense justice more quickly on small claims cases, as an example of the alternative dispute resolution that is also being promoted by, well, not just the Supreme Court, but all judicial reform advocates. So just that brief interjection, Mr. President, an expression of appreciation to our colleagues for the interpellation so far. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, good sponsor.
I thank the gentle lady for her comments, Mr. President. And that's why I think we have to keep in step with trying to be innovative, imaginative within the law to try and create things that will make life better for our people. I personally am excited by this law because it will reduce the backlogs if this persists, if this continues, if this is done. And I think people will find it satisfactory that they can do things faster now by distributing and lessening the burden on the RTC, Mr. President. In any case, whatever they decide also will also go to the court of first instance or regional trial court. So, mabuti na rin yung nariripaso nila lahat yung mga dumadaan sa kanila at anyway, dadaan sa RTC yun. And I hope it doesn't have to. The object of lawyers is to try and compromise first and to try to complete the work of the court as fast and as inexpensive as possible.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. To allow our colleagues further to study the measure, I move that we suspend consideration of the same.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Floor Leader. Thank you, colleagues.
And Mr. President, I move for the additional reference of business.
Secretary will proceed with the additional reference of business.
Additional reference of business, bills on first reading, Senate number 1999, an act creating a vaccine passport program and providing funds therefore, introduced by Senator Cayetano.
To the Committees on Health and Finance.
Senate number 2000, an act granting the President of the Philippines the power to suspend the scheduled increases in PhilHealth premium contribution rates, amending for the purpose Republic Act number 11223, otherwise known as the Universal Healthcare Act, introduced by Senator Go.
The Committee on Health.
Senate number 2001, an act institutionalizing the Philippine National Games and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Go.
To the Committee on Sports and Finance.
Senate number 2002, an act amending Republic Act number 9500, otherwise known as the University of the Philippines Charter of 2008 and for other purposes, introduced by Senators Villanueva, Angara, Binay, Poe, and Zubiri.
To the Committee on Higher Education. There is second additional reference.
Second additional reference of business, bill on first reading, Senate number 2003, an act providing for government financial institutions unified initiatives to distressed enterprises for economic recovery guide, introduced by Senator Soto III.
To the Committee on Banks.
Committee report number 162, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Foreign Relations on PS Resolution number 620, entitled Resolution concurring in the ratification of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Pimentel III.
To the calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that, we are done with our agenda today, Mr. President, and not a very long day. So I did not jinx your day today, Mr. President. Levity aside, I'm sure next week we have a number of very important topics to take up. We'd like to remind the sponsors of many of the measures to be ready by next week, so maybe we can tackle also the priority measures listed on our Senate priority list. With that, Mr. President, I move that we adjourn session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, January 25, 2020.
Any objection? There being none, the session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, January 25, 2021.
Happy weekend, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.